Hello, everyone. So I'm really excited to be here. This is the first time I've ever talked about brand momentum and the brand velocity score. The reason why I'd like to take you through it is really to introduce you to some new ideas that I think will change your way of thinking about brands and how you grow them. Today's presentation, just in a nutshell, will look at why brand velocity and the brand mass are going to be the things that you're going to focus on in the future. We're also going to be looking at how you can become best pals with the CEO. I don't know how you feel about your current CEO, but you're about to change the way you feel and they feel about you because you're going to be focused on growth. We're also going to look at why brand image and reputation studies really don't cut it. And then finally, I'll give you some of the top tips of why 30 is a magic number and really the benefits of what we call brand momentum theory and its approach. So I'd like to really take you back 8 years in time to when we were doing a brand tracking study on airlines. And we noted one particular thing, which was that Monarch Airlines had a very low brand velocity score. And we didn't think much of it at that time. We didn't know what brand velocity really meant. But we've been doing a lot of work since then and actually discovered a year later that Monarch actually went into administration. It was commonly thought of that it was the pound, the falling pound, or Brexit fears, or even low-cost rivals all affecting the way the brand was performing. But ask yourself the question, why only Monarch? Why is it that only Monarch fell when these sort of factors should affect every airline? Because we saw that brand velocity score, which is actually an indication of whether a brand's growing or not, we came to a different conclusion. Actually, we think the consumer or the public themselves were responsible for this low and their poor performance. And we felt that we may have something here that could predict the future. And today, so eight years on, I still believe we can predict, unfortunately, brands that are going to go out of business. When I was writing this book, we actually found the Body Shop also had a very low brand velocity score 6 months before it actually went into administration. And we've seen various other case studies along the time where you can see it. But the good news is, if you've got a high velocity score, you'll also do really well as well. So I'm going to take you back to your school days, first of all, and introduce you to brand momentum theory, which is basically, in physics, mass times velocity, a very simple formula that all brand strategists should really be thinking about. Think of it as a force or as energy. I prefer energy because that's what marketing is really all about. It's about injecting energy into your brand and going forward. So how does that relate? How does physics really relate to marketing? Sorry, I'm not moving forward for a second. Essentially, it's made of two components, just like normal. But we've got brand mass, which is the size of your brand. And what it does is give you an idea of how many customers you've got. It can be customers or users depending on your market, but the most common metric and way we look at it is penetration. So what proportion of your target market are actually buying you today? But the more interesting bit is really what the brand velocity score, and that's the sense of whether it's growing, the brand is static, or whether it's declining. Just a quick few words on brand mass before I talk about brand velocity. Don't know whether many of you are aware of the work by Byron Sharp, but effectively what we now know is the best strategy for growth is actually to attract more customers. If you're focusing on brand reputation, perhaps, or you're focusing on brand loyalty, I'm sorry to say you're not likely to grow very well. But what we also know is that mass is actually one of the biggest factors that affects marketing today. All the modeling work shows that advertising effectiveness, the number one factor that drives it is the size of the brand. So if you really want to improve effectiveness, You've got to just try to focus on actually growing your brand. And then third of all, what most people tend to forget, most marketers, is actually size matters too. What you've got is larger brands are seen as really being more popular, more successful. They're often more readily available. They're often trusted. And this really is all about social proof. If you can become a bigger brand, in the mind of the customer, you are inevitably going to also be seen as a more successful brand. So, let's move on to brand velocity. So as I say, it's a very simple question. We just ask the public, the consumer, your target market, whether they think it's growing, static or declining. It's so simple, you probably think, why not asking this question? I think one of the things that came up earlier as a sort of a resistance to this question was, well, surely people don't know. And what we found is actually they do know, but only collectively. So you can't talk to individuals. You have to actually look at the wisdom of the crowd. And that's why it is really powerful going forward. But interestingly, there's a lot more to it than meets the eye. So first of all, when we did some research, just asking people whether they felt they would be warmed and attracted to growing or declining brands, there was a clear indication that growing brands was appealing. In fact, 30–40% said they are attracted to growing brands, and a similar proportion actually avoid them. So I wasn't expecting consumers to be aware of it, just like they deny advertising affects them. But actually, people are even cognizant of it. Then you've got another key aspect is it actually means a lot of things. It isn't just one metric. For example, what we see is brands that have high velocity are seen as popular and successful. They're also seen as fun and exciting. And actually, they're prepared to pay more for them, which is really important. And it creates all of these sort of values. So by just growing, you can create all of these aspects for your brand. And that's why I think brand reputation studies become redundant. I don't know if any of you do brand tracking, but it takes years and millions of pounds often to change your image. But you can change your velocity very easily, assuming you have a bit of money to spend. So it actually means a lot of things, and I think that's one of the key aspects. We also did a survey amongst CEOs to see what their number one priority is, and it was growth. But the interesting thing is when we did it amongst CMOs, it was 7th. The number one priority for CMOs was actually brand reputation, followed by saving money. So how on earth are they really going to grow if they're focused on saving money? And then finally, it gives another really important aspect to it, which I find really intriguing. We've done qualitative work, and what we find is the work that it's a segmentation in its own mind. Talk to your growers. Those are the people you want. You want more growers because they're the people who are going to give you word of mouth. Statics are a bit more ambivalent, and unfortunately, your decliners are probably an indication they're going to give you negative PR. But also, there are various reasons why they might say it. So they might feel that your marketing isn't actually resonating with them. But they may also feel that you're actually old and tired. So there's some really powerful insights just by coming to people. But don't assume that their perception of growth is real. It is just a calculation in their mind that they think you are growing. So how does it look in the real world? I think basically what we find is velocity declines with the age of the brand. So you will generally see, if you don't do anything, if you don't support your brand will lose velocity. And when we look at things like Liquid Death would be up here with a very high velocity score, growing above this line. Unfortunately, as I mentioned earlier, we saw the Body Shop, which was right down here. Another brand down there was Yahoo. So look out Yahoo, although I understand they are actually picking up some of their velocity. But essentially, you want to be above your competitors. If you want to grow your share and your penetration, you need your brand velocity score. And developing a momentum strategy is very easy. All you have to do, whatever your age of your brand, whether you're young like Liquid Death or an established brand like Coca-Cola, As long as you keep your momentum high, your brand will last longer and you will outperform your competitors and you'll keep your competitors at bay. So where's the proof points? Well, first of all, what we looked at is all our database of brands, which is called our brand bank. And what we found is, year on year, what we get is effectively that the brands that are growing also are the brands that have a high brand velocity score. The brands that are declining, great. In truth, many metrics might do this if this was the same for awareness. However, we see this is a really good indication that it gives you a short-term measure. If you can increase velocity short-term, you will see short-term benefits. But that's really not the interesting bit. The interesting bit is what happens a year or two later. Why is it predictive? And that's the great thing about velocity. It stays in people's minds. And what we found is that brands that actually have that high velocity had double the growth a year or two later. So it stays with you. So if people have this right, if you have the right image, you can actually outperform your competitors. So it's a really important metric. And I'm not aware of any other metric actually able to do that. So how do you create velocity and brand momentum? To be honest, you don't need any new tools. That's the really good thing. Well, you need one new idea. One is to innovate, keeps your brand young and fresh, but also you need to make sure that it's easily available and ready available. Then you've got to tell people, and that's where marketing obviously comes in. But marketing also provides, is also social proof, and social proof actually seems to be the biggest factor that really drives brand velocity. Just imagine, most of us actually buy products because we see other people buying or consuming them. And that's why it's so important to have a really good distribution. And obviously, extending into more categories or having more usage occasions is really important too. But the one area that I think you may be less aware of is actually what I call user image and the idea of rejuvenation. What we looked at was the age, or the perceived age of users of growing brands, and they average 30 years of age, and that's why 30 is really, really good. There is another reason 30 is really good. If I've got time, I'll add that in. But basically, what we see is that brands that are actually declining actually have an older user image than yourself. So effectively, what we find is user image in terms of age is the best predictor of whether you're a growing or declining brand. And I've looked at a lot of case studies of actually brand relaunches, and I think you can actually put them down to actually going for a younger audience. Because you need to have energy, you need to have excitement, and you can only achieve that energy and excitement by keeping your brand young and fresh. So that's why 30 is. Actually, the reason why 30 is also important, we did a survey amongst all adults, and what we found, the ideal age everybody wanted to be, most commonly, was the age 30. So even though you're 25, you're probably going to say, I want to be a bit older. It does vary slightly by age group, but this was going up to 75-year-olds. But if your brand is actually targeting, say, a 65 plus, then you'll probably be looking at keeping your brand in their 40s, for example, because they feel about 20 years younger. There is other research that supports that, but that's the age they want to be. So, finally, really just going to take you through the real 10 benefits. As I said, penetration is one of the key benefits. If you want to grow, you need to grow your mass, and that brand velocity will do that for you as long as you're outperforming your competitors on that metric. Another one is awareness. I really didn't expect to say this, and I'm a little bit reticent about saying it, but what we found is that brands that had high velocity actually grew their awareness for the following year or two. So actually, if you want to grow awareness, get your velocity high. And similarly, what we found is brand velocity scores, which were low, actually saw their brand awareness go down. So it's a bit counterintuitive. I thought brand awareness would actually generate velocity. That's not the case. In fact, velocity can go either up or go down, and actually the probability is it will go down the year or two later. But don't think it's just about growth. This is one of the great things about velocity. It actually increases loyalty. And the reason why it increases loyalty is that it actually makes a big difference to how they perceive the brand. If you think about it, would you want to be loyal to a brand that you think was declining an old hat? Or do you want to be loyal to a brand that's new and exciting? And what we found is people were much more prepared to actually invest in a brand that they thought was growing. It makes logical sense. Why on earth would you invest in a brand that was in decline? But allied to that is also the idea that what we found is that people were prepared to pay more for it. So it's got a lot of kudos actually having this growing perception. And as we've heard, by growing your mass, your marketing will also be more effective. And we've also seen indications that those high-velocity brands will actually be attractive, and actually people will pay more attention to them because they are new and exciting. But as I say, don't get too caught up in being new, because brands like Google still have a lot of velocity and outperform their competitors. But you're also going to achieve a lot more word of mouth by gaining this velocity. So another really key aspect. So a lot of these things are probably things that you're all looking to achieve. Well, this is one, velocity will help you do that. But the thing for me is, particularly for brands that have been around a few years, it actually protects your longevity. And what you find is brands that do keep their velocity high can last forever. That's the thing. If you can keep your velocity high, you will not decline, or be very difficult to. And if you're the market leader, then you will actually help keep your market up there and relevant. It's well known that those market leaders are often responsible for how a category performs. And then finally, you've got good news, because you're going to keep your CEO happy. So that's a really good one for the brand managers and the CMOs here today. So that's it. I hopefully given you a new metric to think about going forward. I don't know. What we found actually when we talked to CMOs, brand awareness was actually the #1 metric. Problem with brand awareness, it doesn't last. It will decline. It will get you a growth, but it's actually only a measure of how far you've reached. How many consumers has my marketing tapped into? So I hope you have learned something today. You found it interesting. Just to finish off with, as you probably know by now, I've written a book. It isn't published yet. It's due out in September and will be officially launched at the Festival of Marketing on the 3rd of October. So thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed today, and do come over to our stand. We're just behind this stage, the Vision One stand. We'd love to see you there, and happy to talk to you. And also, we've got a game there which seems to be very popular. Play your cards right. If any of you are good at guessing the future, come and play our game. You can win some nice prizes too. So thank you.